You guys want to take a break? 30 years ago, I would have said they're going to go take a smoke break, but there we go. I know what it's like to sit up front like that. In the beta, we had the choir would sit right behind me, and so while I was preaching, I would sometimes notice the congregation would be looking at somebody and then going like that. And what I knew was somebody in the choir had fallen asleep. And so what was really bad, I knew my sermons were really bad when I would see this about 20 times, and I turn around and all of them would be asleep. So anyway, this is a good Sunday to share. But as we begin, I just want us to think about the crosses that we see on the side of the roads. Those crosses that are left. Sometimes we see some flowers left behind. Sometimes a name and a date. Sometimes a stuffed animal. Sometimes there's a jersey there. They're crosses that remind us that something tragic had happened there on that very spot on the side of the road. A death had occurred. Someone was killed. And so a family was so devastated such that they wanted to mark that spot because this is where their loved one had died. Sometimes it's a young one. When you travel, can I have just a little more? When you travel through Montana, any of you have been through Montana, you notice that the state puts up crosses along the side of the road where there's been an accident and somebody has died. And as you're traveling around, you see once in a while an occasional cross, but then you'll see 5 or 6 crosses there at one point in the curve of the road, and you know full well that there must have been either a family that died or that this is a curve that you have to slow down on. It oftentimes causes me to take a look at my speedometer and to think about what I'm doing and driving more carefully. I know that when we go from here down to southern Cedar Falls, there are several places that are marked by crosses where somebody has died tragically. And when I pass those places, I know full well that this family is still grieving. They're still missing their loved one. And that cross, in a way, is a way of remembering or commemorating a place that has changed their lives. This morning, as we look at the Easter story as told by Matthew, I want us to be thinking about Jesus' mother, Mary. After the Sabbath, as the first day of the week was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, not Mary, mother of Jesus, but Mary actually is earlier showed as the Mary of Joseph and James, went to see the tomb. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven, came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. For fear of him, the guards shook and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid. I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has been raised. As he said, come see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples. He has been raised from the dead, and indeed he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him. This is my message for you." So they left the tomb. The women, Mary and Mary, left quickly with fear and great joy and ran to tell his disciples. But suddenly Jesus met them and said, "Greetings." And they came to him and took hold of his feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." Amen. For the last 35 years, when I preached the Easter sermon, I began my sermon with a game, basically, that the Christians have been playing for about 2,000 years. That is a greeting that they have as a way of significantly remembering what Jesus has done for them. It is a greeting that they share. I will say, and the Lord is risen, and you respond, "The Lord is risen indeed." And then I will shout amen, and you shout amen. So I'd like to practice that. The Lord is risen.
The Lord is risen indeed.
Amen.
Amen.
Right. My hope is that I will get to the end of my sermon, and my hope is you'll be listening, because I want us to end my sermon with a punctuation mark. The Lord is risen. You were a school teacher, weren't you? Anyway, thank you. We have a mother who's lost a son. She doesn't want to go to the tomb that morning. Mary and the other Mary go to the tomb, to the place where Jesus was laid. But Jesus' mother does not attend with them. We don't know why, but maybe the sadness that she feels in her heart, the grief that she's bearing. After all, she stood at that cross and watched her son die. A horrible and cruel death. It itself was along a major thoroughfare. You see, because the Romans would crucify those people along those pathways where people would be walking. And as you walked and saw people hanging on a cross, it'd make you think twice about crossing the Romans, because you did not want to find yourself as well on the front of a cross. So you wonder, for Mary, where would she go to remember? At that time, a cross was an instrument of death. She wouldn't go to a tomb carrying a cross as a way of remembering what Jesus, her son, had done and what had happened. It appears she's not ready to go to the tomb, as I know many who grieve will return to the grave as a way of just remembering. But Mary, who are part of a people who are well aware of when there was something significant happening in their life, they built a monument or a shrine. Like when Jacob was wrestling with the angel, in that morning he built himself a shrine along the side of that river. And when Joshua crossed the promised land, they stopped with the children of Egypt and they gathered stones and made an altar as a way of remembering that place and remembering that God had got them through to the promised land. So there are people that are instinctively ones to lay rocks and to stack them to mark a place. We should go to Bethlehem where Jesus was born and put a stack of rocks. Or we should go to Nazareth where he grew up as a boy and put a stack of rocks. Would he go to Mary and Martha's and Zechariah and help me. Zacchaeus, not Zacchaeus. Lazarus. And go to their home and say, hey, this is a significant place. We should build this into a museum and I can make a living off of this now. What was Mary going to do? We know that Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph and James, decided that they weren't just going to sit around that first Easter morning. You know how some people are at those times. They got to get up and do something. I see them in every family when we're sitting in a place like a waiting room, waiting for surgery to be completed, and there's always somebody in the family that's always, can you use some coffee? How about a cookie? I've got a lozenge in my purse here. We all have those, and I imagine Mary Magdalene and Mary were on their way to the tomb because they wanted to do something, feeling as helpless as they were. We know that they weren't carrying a cross in some way of marking the spot where Jesus was laid, but we know what they were carrying. They were carrying some kind of ointment and some kind of oils. They were going to, once again, use those ointments and oils and aloes to prepare his body for that death. It was something that they could do. It was something that they could do. But Mary, I can imagine sitting alone, pondering as she pondered when Jesus was born, pondering all that had happened and wondering, what does this mean? My son is gone, he's dead. What does this mean? The only way that we could put ourselves into Mary's shoes is to understand what it's like for a parent to lose a child. A feeling of hopelessness of watching your children. And this has been one of those weeks where the first part of the week I was with Brian Birkenholt's parents. Brian is a new member of our church. He's very tall and he comes here and he's very quiet. But I've known Brian and his parents, Dave and Shirley, because he's the same age as Kim. and we were raising our kids in Newton, and we were in the part of the same age group. But when Brian was 2 years old, he was fighting cancer. Cancer so bad that he looked like a poster child for a child in a country, in a third world country that was starving to death. He was so thin and wore out. You could just see the images of his bones as that treatment began to take its toll upon him, with the hope that he would live. But I can remember sitting with Shirley and Dave as Brian was receiving this treatment and just praying, just hoping. In the darkness of that room, in such of that fear. And here we were this week once again. Dave and Shirley and I were sitting there by the bedside of Brian, only to discover that the treatment that he received when he was 2 years old had weakened his heart and his lungs. Now, as a 33-year-old young man, he's looking at a change in life, not playing golf anymore, not being able to ride his bike anymore, because what had given him life is now taken part of that life away from him. On Thursday, I went to Gladbrook to share at a funeral with one whom I shared with you earlier about Terry Osborne. And in the service, I told once again the story of the altar. You see, there was an altar that was placed in the nursing home there in Gladbrook that had been lost and forgotten, had been abused and used. It had been used as a typing table. And Terry was the administrator of the nursing home. And I went to Terry and I said, Terry, this was an altar from one of our churches. Can I buy something, a typing table, anything to replace it? She said, no, let's just load it up in your car. So I restored that typing table altar and placed it in a place. It was a place where Terry's family gathered before her service, and there it sat as a place where families could gather as they prepared themselves for the funeral of a loved one. Once again, on the side of that table, I had to look at it and feel it again. Do this in remembrance of me. It was that hope that Terry had. As I told that story, as we recalled the bringing of that altar home to the church and restoring it, that in that message of do this in remembrance of me, that it was in remembrance of Jesus, that as she was dying in her last days, it was her thing that her hope for, what she hoped for in her life. In our study Restored this last week, one of the most important things for us as Christians is that we learn to trust in God's love and we learn to trust in God's future. And it is in that we have that promise and that hope that even in death, love will conquer all. And there is the promise in the future with God in that place called heaven. After the funeral, I got a text from Lisa. It said, come by Covenant Hospital. Things are changing for Nancy. So I took off and I stopped by the hospital, and there was Jerry and Maureen. And as I was walking down the hallway, I could see them at a distance, and they had the same kind of look that Dave and Shirley Birkenholtz had for their son Brian, that they had for Nancy. The kind of look that only a parent could have, that, as I said with these kids, you can't put into words what you're feeling. And as Nancy had just decided that she would not take the treatments anymore, but she had hope and trust in God's love and God's future for her. That is what empowered her and gave her the strength to make the decision that I do not have to take this anymore. This is not life. And as Jerry so beautifully said in an email that he sent to his family, that we sent them as a prayer concern, is that is what we celebrate on Easter. And as we celebrate is the resurrection. It is Nancy's hope, but also our hope for those who die. This morning, what we celebrate is the fact is that death loses and love wins. Death loses and love wins because Christ has rose from the dead. And in that, we are given the promise and the hope of that Easter, first Easter, and that hope that we have for our own lives. This morning, as we come fully aware that we're here for a reason. We're here because we too have been touched by God in a way that we come to celebrate the resurrection of His Son. We come to celebrate new life. When I was in Mount Etna, a little tiny church in Adams County, the church is now closed, but there was a family there that had lost a son. He was only 16 years old, and he was on his way to school. It was one of those early spring mornings, and he had just basically got his license, but it had been a road that he had traveled all of his life to get to school. But because of his inexperience, he didn't realize that sometimes when these roads get frosted, they get slippery, that even a car cannot stop itself, and they just slide. Their son was coming to a T intersection, and there was no way of sliding. They could tell by the look of the lines in the road that he had tried stopping, but he went over the edge and hit an embankment down below and ended up being killed by this accident. It was one of the largest funerals I'd ever held, because it was held in the high school, because there was no place in the city to be able to hold the funeral for the children, for all of the students that were there and all that was impacted by this family. But once in a while, as I would drive by the place where he had died, the parents had placed a cross. There you could remember and recall. And once in a while, his parents would be there cleaning up around the cross, pulling weeds and planting flowers, making sure that people knew that they still cared, that they still hurt. And when I saw them, I would stop by the side of the road, and I would get down on my knees if we were pulling weeds, and right beside them, and just not say a word, but just join them and help them and be with them. Because what do you say when a parent has lost a child, when we realize that Mary looked at Jesus? What do you say? I would pray for them, and I would pray for their family as we would depart. My hope is that they would find healing and hope in their own lives that we find in Easter. See, Mary left that tomb. They were surprised by an angel, and the angel had said, "The Lord is risen. Go to Galilee." And so even after Jesus had died, they were still following him. And so on the way, they run into Jesus, and Jesus greets them. He is risen. And they go to tell the disciples, and go meet me in Galilee. And so they meet him in Galilee, and they get their marching orders. Go and share the good news. Baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Be a living example of the love that God has shown you through me. They didn't stop following him after the death, but they continued to follow him after the resurrection. To the point that we are here in Cedar Falls 2,000 years later still talking about this same man who rose from the dead. You see, we're considered an outpost. The sad thing is that many of our churches are looking and acting more like museums dedicated to somebody who has died, as opposed to being a place of celebration for somebody who lives. And in that life brings new life and the possibility of changing the world as he changed the world 2,000 years ago. See, there were 12 men who went and they made a difference in the name of Jesus Christ, and here we are. Because he's alive, and that he lives. And he's still telling us to go out into the world, making a difference. Welcome those greet those, help those, heal those. That we, on a sense, are an outpost from Jerusalem, the place where it happened, an outpost that reminds people of the light and love that comes through Easter. We do this because He is risen.
He is risen indeed.
Amen.